Hey everyone, I'm Will, and if you know anything about mature-minded gamers, you know that we are big video game fans and board game fans. So it's great when a board game company actually brings a video game world to life, and that is the case with Elder Scrolls Call to Arms by Modiphius Entertainment. This is a tabletop skirmish game set in the world of Tamriel. It is absolutely amazing. So let's go ahead and go to the table, take a look about how the game works, and then we'll be back with our review. Alright everyone, so let's take a look at how the game works, but before we can do that, we really have to go over what is a character and what is a hero and what are the followers. So there's different ways to build your army, or if you're playing cooperative, then everyone would be one of the heroes. So you have some of the different characters, like there's the Dragonborn, there is Roloff, there is the Ysirold, there is Imperial Mage, and then Hadvar. Let's take a look at everyone's favorite, and let's just talk about the Dragonborn here. Now, the Dragonborn, if you notice at the bottom, has the basic stats on it. You've got the health, you've got the stamina, you've got magicka, your height, and then as well as the cost when you're your army or team building. Over here, you have your different attributes like your strength, your agility, your endurance, your willpower, and your wisdom, or excuse me, intelligence and then wisdom. And then also when you're rolling on a specific type of test, what number you would roll. When you're making a roll, you're going to take this special D20 that has lots of different sides here, and you're going to roll it trying to roll underneath that value. In this instance, it would be a critical, it would be an automatic success. So when you're doing an attack, you would use the different cards. So for example, you have different weapons that you can get, you have different armors that you can carry, and there's different slots at the bottom of these character cards that are appropriate for each thing. So like one hand, and a body armor. So that would go over here in this slot, the body armor. Over here would go one-handed, and if I had a second-hand weapon, I could equip that there. Over here on the left side, I've got my quick slots for like potions and things that I can immediately utilize. And then over on the right side of the character card is where you can put your inventory for maybe things if you're carrying a weapon that is a dual wield and you want to use a single-handed weapon. One of the actions you can take is to swap those items out. So a list of the actions that you can take is actually pretty decent, decently sized as far as like the different actions and the abilities and like keywords and stuff. So the different actions you could take is you're going to be able to move your hero. So when you move your character, you would take a appropriate mini. In my case, I love my Khajiit. I'm playing one in Elder Scrolls Online using the Nightblade, and I got this as a WizKids model. And I'll be honest, I think these are pretty good for pretty much anything like Frostgrave or Ghost Archipelago. I buy these little packs for pretty much everything, and I think this is just a perfect fit. Your movement is going to be with a tape measure, and you would move your appropriate mini, you know, the number of spaces. Now, most minis are going to move 6 inches. Some of the other actions you could take is you can sprint. So if you sprint, you have light armor. Now, light armor is denoted by these little chain link here. If it had a helm symbol, then that would be heavy armor. But if you're wearing light armor and you want to sprint, you can spend a point of your stamina. In this case, I have 3 stamina I can spend, and I would generate an extra 3 inches of movement. So I'd be able to move a total of 9 inches across the map. So perfect there. Some of the other actions you could take is do a melee attack. We'll get into that in a little bit. You can shoot if you have a ranged weapon. So the example of a ranged weapon will be this hunting bow here. Noticing that it has different dice that I would roll depending on what the range is. It also is a dual-handed weapon, so it would take up both of my single-handed slots. So I couldn't have both of them equipped at the same time. So if I wanted to carry my bow on my item, then my single-handed axe has to go over to my inventory. Some of the other actions you could take is you could take a block, which gives you a block token. You can command, target a friendly model within 6 inches. You can aid, target a friendly model in base contact. You can ready, gain a ready token. Hide, pickpocket, search, searching for examples of like treasure tokens here. And then you could also withdraw, move out of engagement. So if you are engaged with a skeleton, for example here, which this is the Rune War skeleton from Fantasy Flight. I think these skeletons look beautiful. So I use those a lot for when I'm fighting skeletons. And then if you're engaged, you'd be able to move out of engagement. You can swap an item. So as an action, you'd be able to swap the 2 items in your inventory. And as a special action, some different characters have special actions. Now, there's lots of different ways that you can actually boost attacks and stuff. But let's go ahead and get into how an attack works. So let's say I'm engaged with this skeleton. Okay? And I was going to be using my, let me get that in focus here, my Iron War Axe. Okay? It is a single-handed weapon. Notice only the one hand on the hilt. Costs 4 resource to be able to equip it there. You've got, I'm going to be rolling 2 yellow dice, and if I roll the helm symbol, it's going to cause bleeding. So what I would do is, again, I would take my d20, okay? I would then take my 2 yellow dice, and I would roll those together. Before I do so, though, I need to know what number I'm trying to roll. Well, in this instance, it is the single-handed hilt, which is right by the strength test attribute here, and it says 5. So what I need to do on this d20, I need to roll 5 or less. We're like, man, on a d20 at a 1 through 20, that's, a 1/4 chance I'm going to hit it. Well, in this one, it's only 1 through 10, but you also have a miss, a critical hit. You also have the, find it here, the miss with a potion. Okay, what that's going to let you do is either replenish a health, a stamina, or a magicka, or a critical with a potion. So let's say I were to roll that, and I would be able to find out if I hit or not. So I would need to roll under a 5. Well, this instance, I rolled a 7, and I did not strike a hit. Well, how do you know if you hit or not? Again, I need to roll under my strength attribute for what I'm trying to do. It's my skill test. So you're like, well, wow, I mean, you still had a pretty hard chance of hitting him. Well, yes, I did, but some of the things I could do is I can actually spend a point of stamina before I attack, and I could add one of these amazing green dice, which is actually going to lower that die roll result that you get. Noticing it also has a helm on it. So if I hit it with this helm, it's also going to cause bleed. So let's see if I can hit it this time. I'm going to spend a point of stamina. I'm going to roll these dice. Oh my goodness, I had to have rolled the X, so that's a miss anyway. -1 is nil, so I completely missed this attack. But let's say I had rolled a 6. So if I rolled a 6, minus the 1 is my 5. That means I did hit the enemy. Now, what you have to then know is, what are you trying to roll against? Well, again, I hit the model. So my next concern is, well, what does the enemy skeleton defend with? So what you would do is you would take a look at the skeleton adversary card. So when you look at these skeleton adversary cards, it tells you then their skills as well as what their armor is. Okay, so its armor is light armor, and they are rating of a yellow. So what they would do is they would take a yellow dice and they would roll it, and then they would score a result of if it's the starburst, that is a hit. They would block one of the hits. Well, 1 still goes through. The skeletons only have 1 health. The skeleton would die. All right. So if I was attacking another player, we were playing competitive, the number of different, so let's say I hit him and, 2 got through, well, the enemy hero would take 2 health loss. And it's very similar when you're doing the same thing, but this, if I was doing a range attack, but I'd be rolling, if I was using this Dragonborn, I'd have to roll under a 4. But what you would need to look at, though, is your weapon for the bow. Shows me here that this one is going to be rolling under 10 inches, is going to be rolling a green and a red. At 10 to 20, it is green and a yellow. And it does piercing. Well, what is piercing? Piercing is if they roll a dice and they hit a block result, then 1 is negated. If it was piercing 2, then 2 would be negated. So it basically negates defense roll results, which is pretty cool. It makes it a lot easier to actually cause some wounds. Now, there are a lot of different keywords that I've kind of talked about, like bleed, there is feeble, there is piercing, there is just so many different keywords. Shadow, cautious, you have light armor, heavy armor, dragon shouts, frost resistance, dual savagery, intimidation, treasure hunter. There's a lot of keywords. Now, with that being said, though, all these keywords and everything, at the back of the book, there is a entire, like, I think it's like 8 pages devoted to all of the keywords and the different stats and what they mean. And there are a bunch of them. Let's kind of zoom out the camera there so you can see them a little bit better. There are a bunch of different keywords in this book. And, it's going to take you a while to kind of figure out and find, hey, this is my character, this is what it does. But, I mean, the more you play it and the more you kind of play your characters, the more you kind of understand what all of these different keywords do. I mean, it's no different than when you think of like Elder Scrolls Online and you have all these different skills you can actually put points into, and it's like, well, what do I need for this, and what would be the best here? What does this one do? And you're learning each one of those. I tell you, these are basically like skill trees. So I mean, every time you have these different options in here, and there's different ways that you may be able to generate some of these. So when you get different items and upgraded items, like maybe like a treasure. You may get, so for example, let's find a good treasure here. And let's show you. So for example, you've got this one here, which is the Ancient Nord Battle Axe of Frost. And this one here, damage is green, red, red. And then on a skull, you're going to roll a yellow plus frost. And if it's a sword, you're going to cause bleed. You've got keywords over here on the right says cumbersome, enchanted, two-handed block. So many different keywords to kind of wrap your head around and understand. But like I said, once you get the basics, it's going to just flow. So how does a basic game work? So in a delve, for example, you are going to be reading through the back of this quest journal here, which is a pretty thick journal and has, a whole actually bunch of rules in and of itself. But in the back of this book, it does have a quest. Okay, it's called the Bleak Falls Barrow Adventure. Now there is an actual miniatures box called the Bleak Falls Barrow Delve Set, which has a box of skeletons, and it also has the miniature for the Dragonborn. So I think that's definitely a good one to start. It is a little bit more expensive than the other two. But what it allows you to do is it kind of gives you a story for how to play and what scenarios to play, what delves to play, to be able to do that adventure. Now, in this example, we have the delve mode scenario 4, the Realm of the Dead. Gives you an example of where you're going to set up your battle line, your treasure zone, where enemies are going to spawn in. So, and then over here, it's got different tables to look at as far as you've got your gold septum limit, which is the value of how much you pay for things. You lose if you only score 7 victory points. You have a narrow victory if you score 9 to 13 or 14 plus if you're doing this many septums. Then, if you're playing a bigger game, you have more minis or more items that you equipped at the beginning, it's going to be even harder to win. But down here, you have different victory conditions. Each player can score these once. I will search all the treasure tokens before the game ends. 3 victory points. You're killing a skeleton, a victory point. Killing another type of enemy, victory point. It tells you 25% of your adversaries must be what's a trait here is, it says 25% of the adversary models rounded up to the nearest whole number must be undead and or vampires. So cool, man. So it definitely seems like vampires are going to be coming later. So you've got that going on. You are going to set up. You're going to place out some terrain out on the table. So we've got another WizKids, little fountain here, which is pretty cool. And then I've also got this hamlet here that's from Bolt Action, which works well for these kind of games. You're going to set up different tokens depending on the type of scenarios. For example, here we have a objective token. We have a treasure token. That's going to explain to you, like, you need to set up some enemies on the board. So we've got enemies here. So we would start off with what is called advantage, means we're going to activate first. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to decide, hey, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move 6 inches. So I'm going to take my character, which, again, even though he's a Dragonborn, doesn't mean he couldn't be Khajiit, which is perfectly fine. And even in the rulebook, there is actually a races section that goes over that, the races of Tamriel, which is cool because it goes over Argonian, Bosmer, Breton, Dunmer, Imperial, Khajiit, Nord. You got the Orsimer, you got the Red Guard, You've got the other races, the Daedra. You've got all these races that you can still be, even though this picture is one thing, doesn't mean you couldn't play how you want. And the cool thing about it is each of these races are going to gain you extra benefits. So for example, like this Khajiit here, all Khajiit use teeth and claws if they are attacking without an equipped weapon, and they also have Night Eye. Which again, more keywords to look up in the back of the book and understand how they work. So again, a lot going on. So if I was going to take my character and I was going to move up here and then, I'm going to go ahead and boost my attack. And let's see, I rolled a 10, -3 is a 7. So again, another miss. That was my 2 actions. I would take these different tokens that the game includes in the box, and I would have a whole pile of these tokens. They're numbered 1 through 7. There's 2 sets, and there's 2 sets for a reason. One, when you actually set up the miniatures on the table, what you're going to do is you're going to put the numbers corresponding to each one. So let's say I take 1 and 2 out here on the table here. I would have 2 tokens, the 1 and 2 token, in a pile face down, or we put them in a little dice bag, mix them up, not knowing who's going to activate. So after I've taken my 2 actions, what I do to look see if there's any models within 6 inches of me, including this one, and they would take a reaction. So when they react, this one would actually activate. Now, how do you know what they're going to do? Well, great question, because the game also includes not only the skeleton archer card that I showed you before, so you know what their stats are, but there's actually a list of cards for depending on what you're fighting. So for example, if you're fighting the Draugr, which is what the skeletons are, you would look at this chart here and it would tell you different things, whether they are the might, shadow, or sorcery. So when we look at the skeleton here, we can see that they are at the very top there, the path of shadow. So we would know how these particular guys would react depending on what I roll here. So then what I would do is I would look at this middle chart for shadow. I would roll a black dice, getting a result, okay, and they all have different stats on there, and I would get the helm, okay. So after I got the helm result, I would again consult the chart, figure out what it's going to do. So I get the helm F, and that means they're going to fall back. Now the game in the rule book has this on page 60 through 70, I believe it is. It has all these different charts as far as like how the models are going to react depending on what their shadow, their might, they're cautious. So that's another trait to look at and another keyword. So on here you've got the path, they are attribute of cautious. So right here, so the path shadow, attribute cautious, how they react when they're cautious. So what I do is I look in the book, and I look on page 67 here, I look for the fallback option. Then I would look for the cautious adversaries, and it would tell me exactly what they do, even including a flow chart here. So if I consult this flow chart, they would move. If the enemy is in within the line of sight, they would put up a block. If no enemy is in the line of sight, they would try to hide. So he's going to try to move and try to get the best cover as possible. He's going to be even taking a sprint action. So he could even come all the way back here to get the best cover. And because I'm no longer within line of sight because he's behind this building, he would get a hide. Now, again, another token, another keyword that adds different abilities and different effects. You would take the hide token, which again, there's way more tokens that I haven't showed you yet, which are tons of different stats like block, hide. You could be staggered, incapacitated. So we would take a hide token. So the hide token is this little eyeball here. And we would put the token by him. Now he has reacted, so he cannot activate again this turn. Now according to what scenario I'm doing and which of the rule books I'm doing, or which of the objective, or scenarios, delves I'm doing, when I look at this book and I build my layout, it's going to also tell me what is the pool for as far as like how many are going to activate. Well, in this small game, I'm only going to be able to react with one or activate with one. So what I'm going to do is at the beginning, before I would have done anything, I would have picked one of these two. He's going to react. Okay, he reacted by falling back and he took a block. So now the one that I picked of the game, he's going to activate number 2. Well, this was number 2, so nothing happens. Okay, so now it goes back to me. Okay, I've already activated. They've taken their action, and that is the end of the round. This particular scenario does 8 rounds. At the end of that, we would draw an event card. Now, the event card is also going to be a different icon with the different sets, whether you're going to be in wilderness, you're going to be in town, or you're doing a delve or a battle mode or a delve. Also, depending on whether you're in wilderness and everything, there's so many different things to look at here, and it's going to tell you some story about what happens, how many enemies spawn of your spawn pool, and then whether it is a threat, wilderness, whether it's delve. All that information is on these cards, and there are so many cards. So here are some of the little cards. Here are more little cards. Here are the rest of the little cards. There are so many cards, and there are a ton of them. If you can't see, there's how many there are. Let's kind of give you there's a lot of little cards in this, and a lot of tokens, a lot of rule book for $45. This game is on point. I think it's really high up there, like I said, with Frostgrave. And yeah, let's go back up, and we'll tell you our thoughts of the game. All right, so as you can tell, there is a lot going on in this game. There's a lot of icons to get your head around. There are a lot of keywords to get your head around. Once you do, though, I don't think the game has any problems as far as being hard to understand, hard to play. It's pretty straightforward as far as like how the attacks work, how the modifier dice work, and how the enemies behave if you're playing the cooperative or the solo mode. I like character building. I like how you can level up your character, but as we all know in Elder Scrolls, it's also more about that equipment that you're carrying and that you're using, and that how that really enhances your stats. And I play a lot of Elder Scrolls Online, and that is one of my favorite Elder Scrolls games. I think that this game really captures the feel of Tamriel. I'm looking forward to how delves are going to be introduced later. I know in the dev diaries that they have on the Modiphius website, they talk about possibility of dragons later. I know we're all kind of excited about that. I can't wait till we start seeing some user created content. I'm hoping that people are going to come up with some delve ideas and some different enemies, and I'm excited for the future of this game. I've been using the WizKids models myself. I love what Modiphius did with the starter. They've introduced a lower price point box that has all the cards, the rules, the dice, everything you really need to play the game, minus the miniatures, and they offered it for a very good price, $45, not a big deal. I mean, there are a lot of other 2-player games out there for like miniatures games you can be spending $100 easy on. And, that has a whole bunch of, miniatures in it, as well as the rules and the tokens and the dice and stuff. And a lot of times you get these games, it's like $100 for a 2-player starter, and you're like, man, I don't even know if I'm going to like this game. I like what they did as far as that lower price point, because then it introduces you all the rules, and you can use whatever models you have, whatever you like. I mean, you really don't need the Modiphius models. Now, aesthetically, the Modiphius models look absolutely amazing. They're available in 2 different types, either resin or hard plastic. I picked up the plastic ones. As far as like basing my models, it's whatever. I don't have a hard time actually putting some stuff down on bases, so it wasn't a big deal for me. I tend to generate or gravitate more towards the hard plastic myself. I picked them up. I haven't built them yet. So as far as like how fiddly they are, I've seen some of the rules or the instructions on how to put them together. And I think they're going to lend a little bit to the irritating side to put together. I mean, you have to put a face on a head. Like, really? I mean, seriously, you couldn't just put the head part of the body. I don't know why companies do that. They make it a little bit too much. I want to put the model together. I want to play. I don't necessarily think putting these models together is going to be the easiest for the beginner. But if you have some experience piecing models together, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal for you. It's just more irritating than anything. As far as the contents of the starter, I'm not disappointed at all. I think, they give you 6 different delves to do. They give you a campaign to do. They give you several scenarios. The rule book itself was, like I said, pretty well done. I think the best way for you to learn this game is to pick up that tutorial book and actually just start with that. Don't start with the rule book. I think it can overwhelm you pretty quickly unless you're very familiar maybe with the Fallout board game, which, it's the sister game for this. And, I think that game is amazing as well. But as far as their designs and how they've made the game feel and how you roll dice and how you can use stamina and magicka and how that replenishes, it's awesome. It's awesome. I love how when you're out on the field and you have an event card or an objective card or a treasure card, that you can generate more quests. You pick up new items and you equip them and you have to swap, and I think that's awesome. I really love how they capture the feel. If there's anything that I would love to have seen a little bit more, is I would love to have seen a little bit more definitive story, I guess, in the delves. I know they've kind of like, oh, you start this when you read kind of, this is why you're starting this mission. But I'd like to see like some sort of like conclusion paragraph or chapter as far as like what's going on and what happened at the end, I know part of playing the game is the actual story, but I'd like to see, hey, this is the conclusion with this particular delve. I don't know. It's just a little bit of wish, I guess, is what I'd like to have seen. But this game is on point. Do not hesitate to pick this one up. I think this is absolutely a must-buy if you are a fan of the Elder Scrolls franchise and you are halfway interested in miniatures games. This game right up there with Ghost Archipelago, Frostgrave. If you like those games as well, I really think this is going to be a perfect fit in your collection. And if you're an Elder Scrolls fan, it's just a must-have. So, all right, everyone, if you like what you see here, please hit that like and subscribe button. This has been Will from Mature Minded Gamers, and until next time,